Hey y'all, I am back with the next chapters of Shattered Silence. If you guys haven't been reading this with me, you can go back in this playlist and you can go rewatch all of the chapters. Today we are on chapter 27. I do expect to read about 4 chapters, and that's what I will be doing until we finish. We're a little bit over the halfway mark, so just a recap for that. But before I get started here, I just wanted to let you guys know that I have watched the first 4 episodes of the Happy Face Killer or Happy Face on Paramount Plus. Melissa G. Moore did help in production of this show, and it's very obvious that it's about her and her father, but also very not. They changed names. It's very, I had heard from people that it was a lot like the book. However, it is not. It's kind of sad that they don't highlight some of the women and use their actual names in the victims. That, again, that's just my opinion. But I'll do a whole nother video solely on that series as it gets closer to finishing up. But it does put Melissa G. Moore in a better light, as I've stated, and as she's even stated in her book. She wants to be famous, and that's the way it's looking so far. That coupled with all of the stuff that she has advocated for Gypsy Rose. I had some people comment on some of my videos over on TikTok and tell me that they feel like she's just using Gypsy Rose to get back at her father, which is an interesting perspective. So if you guys see that perspective, definitely comment down below and see what your perspective on that. My perspective is that she is learning certain things from Gypsy Rose. This show kind of says a lot about it, because she's kind of taking what Hulu did with The Act and putting hers in a fictionalized show on Paramount Plus. Again, just my opinion, but that's what I see. I just think that she's after fame and fortune, and she's not looking at any other, she's not trying to help or trying to educate or trying to give justice. She is simply doing this for monetary gain. Again, only my opinion, but let me know what you guys think down below. All right, so let's get to it, guys. So again, we're gonna start back up Shattered Silence, the untold story of a serial killer's daughter by Melissa G. Moore. And again, she has a ghostwriter on here, M. Bridget Cook, as well. So we're on chapter 27. It's called Dragon Slayer. While my father was in Clark County Jail, I found myself outside of the loop, not knowing what was happening with him. There were 2 unspoken rules. 1, don't talk about it, and 2, don't ask questions either. Everything I knew came from what was in the newspapers, and there wasn't much. When I happened to be in the area of the downtown library, I would look for articles in the daily papers, but I didn't know how to conduct any sort of formal research. I thought my father was going to serve time for Julie's murder, and then it would be over. I thought it might turn around somehow, whether I would admit it to myself or not. What I was searching for were clues that my father didn't murder her in cold blood. I didn't want to believe that it was blatant homicide. Considering the circumstances, I honestly thought very little about what was going on with my dad. Survival was all I could focus on, getting to and from school, completing homework, and finishing out my freshman year. The biggest issue on my mind wasn't my dad, it was my pregnancy. I was in a constant state of fear. How much time did I have before people could tell I was pregnant? I was afraid of other people's judgments. I could hear the words slut and stupid pregnant teenager. How many times had I heard people pass that judgment? How many times had I passed it when I never thought I would be in this predicament? I was in fear of telling my mother. What would she do? Would she kick me out of the house? Would she hate me? Would she believe those things about me? A natural effect of being pregnant was wildly fluctuating hormones and fragile emotions. I cried all the time for reasons I couldn't explain in words, and sometimes for no reason at all. I definitely had stressors at home, and I also had stressors at school with how Sean was treating me. He was extremely unhappy that I hadn't made a final decision on the pregnancy, so he would show me where it hurt the most. In front of my friends, he had yelled at me and called me a bitch. My earlier resolve to completely sever ties with him had crumbled when I found out I was pregnant. Not having anyone else to talk to or to give me a ride home so I could sleep in the afternoons, I had been afraid to leave him. I was putting up with behavior I would have never believed possible, but every day I stayed with him anyway, and the pressure from him to get an abortion was growing stronger and stronger. From what Sean and his parents had told me, I only had a limited amount of time to make whatever decision I was going to make. Another 6 or 7 weeks to be exact. If I was going to get an abortion, it had to be in the first trimester. My brain was in constant state of war. Sean's parents urged the abortion, didn't help. I had always done research when I had a problem. I would find out as much information as possible on my issue so that I can make a wise, informed decision. In this case, I felt so uneducated about my entire pregnancy. I knew that there were some resources out there, but I didn't know where to go. I didn't want anyone seeing me either. We didn't have a computer, so I was going to have to put myself out there in order to discover some information. I knew I had to make a decision, and I had to make it fast. All of a sudden, I realized that I had been waiting for someone that I trusted to show up and show me the way to go. The next morning, I rose at 5 a.m. My body could have easily slept for another 4 or 5 hours, but I showered and got ready for school while the house was quiet and the bathroom was empty. Having 4 females and three males sharing the bathroom was often a trial, so I avoided it by being the first one up each morning. I caught my first bus of the day and then took off at my first stop. I had to walk for some time through a neighborhood in between the stops. I passed apartment complexes and county library and the county library to reach the corner of Division and Hawthorne, where I would take the next bus. I was so grateful it was spring and that the huge mounds of snow I had trudged through in my sneakers just weeks ago were all gone. I was already exhausted. I checked my watch, making sure I had left enough of a cushion to catch up to the bus on Division Street. Since Shadow High was almost in the center of downtown, I would get off at Weasley, 40, E and W, to take another bus east for 25 more minutes. Then I would finally arrive for the day at school, and a few minutes before the bell rang. Initially, my decision to bus to Shadow had been liberating on some aspects. I had quickly learned to be independent and rely on myself. I was the one in charge of finding the correct schedule, and it was all on my shoulders to catch the buses on time. It cost me 75 cents each day to ride the bus, so it taught me to prepare ahead of time. I would babysit, scrounge for cash, and do odd jobs as needed. I felt confident because I had overcome all these obstacles and continue to make it to school. Today, however, I felt isolated and alone on the morning commute. I hadn't minded before that there was no one my age who took this route. The buses were primarily filled with college students, business professionals, and an occasion elderly or poverty-stricken person. This morning, I was feeling abandoned and angry. I felt like my mother didn't care about the circumstances I was in. Anger with my father also simmered beneath the surface. My hero was behind bars, along with all the dreams he had shared with me. A car for me, a house in Astoria, a future. He had thrown it all away. So, first of all, explaining your bus route, was something we didn't need. Unless you live in the area she grew up in, which I believe it was in Washington, you don't know this information. So it really, again, it throws off the reader. And like I said, I kind of got stumbled up on that because I'm like, I don't know these neighborhoods. So what does it matter to me? You know what I mean? it's easier just to say I got off one bus and got on another. And also, we're still on this track of, I'm trying to debunk what your father's done and still yearning for that attention, which I have already said, and the show proves it even more, is that Melissa Moore's concerns about her father are only because she sees her father in herself, and her father sees himself in her. So there is something that is there that is driving Melissa Moore to not only think like this, but is like this. Also considering the fact that she gave Gypsy Rose Blanchard her fame that she currently has. So, with that being said, again, it's just my opinion, but that's the way I feel about this, okay? The whole ride was quiet. Most of the students were doing homework or reviewing test questions. How I longed to be in college with them. I dreamed of a better life a higher education could bring. All the way to school, I daydreamed of this better life without the limitations of pregnancy. First, I imagined getting a car. That would mean I could participate in after school sports and clubs. I'd actually made it on the volleyball team, but I'd had to quit when I realized by the time practice was over, there wouldn't be time to catch all the necessary buses to get home. Besides, I had no money to buy the uniforms. A car would provide more flexible schedule and enable me to get a job to pay for my extracurricular activities. As the bus rounded a corner, I daydreamed of getting braces. My horrible crooked teeth had kept me from a real smile most of my life. I was so self-conscious of my teeth that I only curved my lips a bite to smile, and I never showed a true grin. It was also necessary to monitor my laughter carefully, in case a rebellious smile slipped behind its strict bounds. With straight teeth, I would be able to laugh and smile whenever I wanted. That daydream left me with a joyful and lovely feeling. Something in common with the mama killer, G Rose, right? As I caught the final bus to school, I knew it was time to think about reality. I had to face my decision with the baby and with Sean. I ran through scenarios of how I could escape the situation I was facing, but I didn't see any answers. At that moment, I felt I was in the worst possible situation any girl my age would ever be faced with: pregnancy, living in an impoverished, abusive home, in an abusive relationship with the father in jail for murder. These thoughts made me want to cry, but I saved my tears for nighttime in my pillow. My options were few and my future looked bleak. I was not yet 16 and I would not be able to afford a child without a job. Everywhere I turned, I heard the fact that pregnant teens were less likely to finish high school. Obtaining my diploma was the only hope of getting out of poverty. It was my main goal. Once again, I realized I had been waiting for someone to rescue me, a hero, a knight in shining armor, someone to slay my dragons and allay my fears, someone to fix everything and make it all right. That day, I set an appointment with Planned Parenthood, the first of several. So, again, we have connections to G Rose here, the fantasy and the outlook on life that somebody is going to swoop in and save you and you're not going to have to deal with any of your issues. It just lives in a fantasy world, you know? I'll take you to your appointments if you agree to get an abortion, Sean said when I told him. Sean, I told you, I haven't decided, I said firmly. I need to understand what all my options are. I'm going there today to find out more information so I can make a wise, well-informed decision. He looked at me for a long time without saying anything. I didn't care. I would find a way to get there and I would make my own decision. He seems to sense my independent spirit and it changed his mind. I'll take you, he said, and then realized he probably meant to use the time there and back to pressure me further. I was grateful for the rides, but I felt as though I was stuck between choosing bad over worse. As he dropped me off, he said, "Remember, I'll pay for the procedure." Some knight in shining armor. Without a word, I walked inside. No night had come. There was no soldier to fight my battles, slay my dragons, kiss away my fears, and chase the demons away from inside my head. Once again, I didn't have anyone to talk to. Like my baby kittens on the clothesline, I felt suspended in midair, beating back my life. But today I would don the armor myself. I would raise my sword and face the demons in my mind. Today, I would become educated. Okay. I wanted to kind of touch on this a little bit. So in the show, it comes up with her dad that she had an abortion. So I am assuming, and again, this show is very fictionalized, but I am assuming she does eventually tell her dad about this. Now, I don't know if that's true. We'll continue reading because this is a little more down to earth, real life stuff compared to what that show is. But I do feel like she told her dad, and I do feel like her dad would use it against her, in my opinion. So we're on chapter 28, The Oppressor. While attending one of my Planned Parenthood appointments, I saw the outline of the baby through the ultrasound machine. I remember thinking that even though it resembled the shape of a peanut, it was a cute living creature. For the first time, I allowed myself not to think of the life inside me as an unwanted obstacle, but as a human being. My heart softened and I felt love overturn fear. That feeling lasted until I arrived home. Walking down the steps to my room, where I had to pull a string to turn the light on, where I used shoeboxes for a dresser and an old green army cot for a bed, I tried to picture a sleeping infant. It would not work. It would not be fair to the child. My initial thought was that my decision would have to be for an abortion, and it was not the answer I wanted. That night, I cried for 3 hours straight, quietly into my pillow. I poured my heart out. I didn't come up for dinner, but Mom, Robert, and Grandma didn't seem to notice. Carrie and Jason knew something was wrong and likely thought it had to do with my father. I let them think that. It was so much easier that way. After that night, I started to play with thoughts of giving the child up for adoption. Sean would not hear of it, but I had some say in the matter and I told him so. I began to realize that in this scenario, I would be stuck with spending the daytime hours with either Sean or Robert for months on end, and for however long it took after the baby was born. That thought was the most terrifying of all. I was sick to death of Sean's badgering. He tormented me every day, trying to get me to accept his way of getting rid of the problem. He called me names, told me I was getting fat, and that he hated looking at my changing body. In a way, I was glad because it also meant that physically he left me alone, which was what I wanted. I'd had no desire for intimacy since the rape. I also stayed with Sean to have some kind of listening ear and support. Okay. The school year had ended in a nightmare. Glad to have survived. I didn't know how I would make it through the next month. I had only 2 weeks left to decide what to do with the baby, or it would be too late. One afternoon, Sean picked me up from my grandmother's to take me to Planned Parenthood. I was going there regularly so they could monitor my health. I hadn't seen a doctor since I was a little kid, except for when I was hospitalized after the attack the previous year. Sean's mom had invited me over for dinner. Afterwards, his parents went out for drinks with friends, and Sean and I decided to watch a movie on TV. I sighed knowing that soon enough it would be time to go home. Wrapped in a familiar catch-22, I didn't want to go home, but I didn't want to be at Sean's either. I lost myself in the only place I was comfortable for the moment, and that was escaping into the movie, into someone else's life for a little while. As we watched the program, Sean kept looking at my belly. Finally, I pulled my knees up to my chest. I pulled my oversized sweatshirt down over them, pretending I was trying to keep warm. When the program was over, Sean got up and motioned me to the door off to the side of the room. "Melissa, come here for a minute," he demanded. I was puzzled. I knew it was his bedroom, and I didn't want to go in there. He hadn't looked like he desired me for weeks, so I had been feeling safe with him. "Come here, just for a minute," he repeated. I did what he asked and came over to the door. The door itself opened inward, inside his room. "I have an idea," he exclaimed. "Stand inside here with your back to the wall," he said, motioning behind the door. "What's your idea?" I asked, still puzzled. "You'll see," he said. As I stood behind the door, he suddenly slammed it into me from the front side, causing the knob to hit my stomach with incredible force. I cried out in pain and crumbled to the floor. What was he trying to do to me? "Stand up again, Melissa," he ordered. No way. I wouldn't let him hurt me again. I backed away from the door and rose a little, looking around wildly for something to protect myself with. As soon as I had straightened, he punched my stomach with his fist. I thought the first blow had been agonizing, but part of the force of it had been taken by my foot. This time I felt the full force of his blow, and I dropped once more to the floor, withering in pain. "Sean, stop," I screamed, struggling to breathe from the force of the punch. "This is not the way to solve this. Please stop." He looked at me for a moment, and then he reached behind me, grabbing a baseball bat from out of his closet. I curled up into the ball, crying. I had flashbacks of the attack at the park that had been total strangers. Now here was someone who had professed to care about me, trying to kill me. "Get up," Sean screamed. "No," I cried. He kicked my arms out of the way. Down come the bat. I curled again in self-preservation. I didn't know how I was going to survive this. I was certain the baby wouldn't, which was obviously his clear intent. The bat came down again. "Get up, you bitch," he screamed. "Get up." Again and again he struck me with the bat as close to the gut as he could get. Abruptly, there came the sound of a car pulling up, lights flashing across the driveway. Before his parents could come in the house, he hit me one more time. "Shut up," he menaced, "and don't you dare make a noise, you hear me?" I nodded painfully. I would have done whatever he asked at that moment. He got up and left the room. A few minutes later, he came back. I was still curled in a fetal position, tears silently straining my cheeks. "Let's go," he said. We walked out to his car in the darkness, and he took me home. I thought I had hated him before. Now I detested him and myself for getting into that situation. Sean knew I was in fear of my mother's response to my pregnancy. He was aware that I had nowhere to turn. Realizing that I had not revealed the rape to anyone, he was aware I would never tell another soul about tonight. He was a bully, an abuser, and tonight he had gotten his way once again through force. I stumbled down the stairs in the dark, not daring to turn on the light. The next morning, I told Jason and Carrie I had the flu, and everyone left me alone while I slept and recovered from my beating. As soon as the last person was gone from the basement, I sobbed into my pillow. I not only cried for myself, I cried for the baby that could never be. So that's pretty traumatic, honestly. Like, the fact that she had more kids down the line too is a little bit telling on it. But it's even funnier because, again, I'm going to mention the show, and in the show it does say she had an abortion, and it wasn't like this forceful. She actually even goes back and talks with the ex-boyfriend. So don't we want to be truthful in a show that's exposing your father and actually give the victims a little bit of the spotlight? Maybe not. Maybe you just want it to be about you. I don't know. All right, so we are on our third chapter for this episode, chapter 29, Love Daffodils. At 12 weeks pregnant, just before my 16th birthday, Sean drove me in his parents' car to Planned Parenthood. I felt tense and uneasy at the final decision. Sean was pleased, and so were his parents, but all I could do was cry inside. At my arrival, the attendants gave me 2 pills and a small Dixie cup for water. I had always had difficulty swallowing pills, so I did not take the medication. Then I changed into a hospital gown and was escorted into a small square room. I lay on the examining table and looked up at the ceiling as hate filled every fiber of my being. I hated Sean. I wanted him to leave the room. I really wanted to hit him and punch him in the face for all the torment I was feeling. There was a mobile hanging to my right, and that had the outlines of birds. The birds floated with the breeze in the room, and I kept my gaze fixated on it. I refused to look at Sean when I felt the pressure and pain from the machine tearing into my body. I cried out and it frightened the attendants. The pills they had given me were supposed to reduce the pain. I hadn't known that the procedure would be physically painful, and they hadn't known I didn't take the medication. That's kind of like, I don't know, I guess you're 16, but still, it's like, I think they would have told you that. You know what I mean? Like, they would have told you, like, take these pills, they're for the pain. And I'm sure if she was going to Planned Parenthood, like, on a constant basis, like she claimed she was, she would know this because she was making a well-informed decision, right? Maybe not. I don't know. When this procedure was complete, Sean drove me to his home. The plan was for me to stay there and regain color in my face before my mother saw me. The opposing emotion of grief and relief fought for dominance in my heart. I was grieving for the child I would never know. I was also relieved that I could finally leave Sean and never look back. Soon other thoughts came. I would now be able to finish high school and have a chance at a normal life. I could go to dances, graduate, and go to college. These thoughts were supposed to make me happy, but my grief consumed me. I would have let myself just feel for a while. In the meantime, though I didn't really know God, I begged for his forgiveness. A few days later, when my body was sufficiently healed to be up and about, Sean invited me over to spend time together. We're through, Sean, I informed him. I don't ever want to see you again. Sean didn't agree. He wanted to stay together and tried being the gentleman again. That had earned him my trust twice before. To gain resolve, I remembered the rape, the treatment in front of my friends, and the attack against my body and the baby. I stood my ground firmly. Sean's parting words were demeaning and cruel. He made me feel that my body was no longer sacred, that I was already used, and that no one would ever want me. It took me some time to get over the continued grief and pain, but after a few weeks, I knew I could do it. Still, I desperately wanted my mother's healing touch, her love, her affection, and her understanding. So, I want to just go over a couple of things within this first portion. So, like I said, so one with the pills, they're going to sit there and talk to you. She said that she made a bunch of trips to Planned Parenthood trying to make an informed decision, but yet you're not taking pills and they didn't talk to you about the procedure during this time because that was one of your options. I find that very strange. So it's giving very contradictory at this point. Then the other thing here is, I think, at the end she says that, she wants her mother's healing touch, her love, her affection. But in other chapters, we hear that your mother never gave you anything like that. So why were you, I can understand yearning for it, but why are you saying now you want it during this hard time, which is, again, understandable, but she's never given that to you, so you're not going to get it. That's kind of, I don't know if that's what she means, but that's just where it's going. So, I don't know. 2 weeks after the abortion, I knew I needed to tell my mother. I had grown up in those 2 weeks and had faced some of my worst fears. I had known I would tell her for quite some time, even before the procedure. But I didn't want to feel like she had to make my choice for me. That wouldn't have been fair. I had wanted to shield her from the pain of the rape and the assault. Tonight we were alone in the kitchen and it was quiet. Mom, I said quietly, I need you to know something important. She looked at me unexpectedly and waited. I just want you to know that I had an abortion. I was raped and I didn't know what else to do. My mother gave me a look that I will never forget. Please don't tell me anymore, it said, so I didn't. For the next week or so, I completely avoided my mother. I was afraid she was ashamed of me, unable to believe she had such a trampy disgrace for a daughter. What she didn't know, what nobody knew, is that I kept praying to God that he would forgive me for what I had did, even though I couldn't seem to forgive myself. My heart felt tied into knots all the time and could barely breathe. I dove into food and found myself gorging on tremendous amounts of it. It gave me comfort for brief periods of time, but it didn't feel good for long because soon I would feel even worse for having eaten so much, for not taking care of my body. I woke up one morning soon after that, and for the first time in my life, I contemplated suicide. What was my life worth? Sean had said no man would want me. My home life situation had di- my home life situation had deteriorated. I was afraid of my siblings constantly at home. I was afraid for my siblings constantly at home and in the world. I'd finally opened up to my mother, and all I had felt was her disgrace and disappointment. My dad could never help me again. I had no one to talk to or lean on. My body was still weak, and I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. When I realized it was contemplating the end of my life, I snapped out of it in an instant. It was only long enough to pray to God, who was such a mystery to me. The former prayers of my youth felt cold and distant. The praise filled prayers of the Foursquare Church felt beyond what I was capable of. I uttered a simple but sincere prayer straight from my heart. Dear God, please help me. I have nowhere to turn except to you. If you know who I am, if I'm supposed to be here for any reason, please let me know. Exhausted, I fell back asleep. When I awoke, I felt like I had been in the most delirious dream. It was filled with so much joy, like I had never known before. I felt peace and comfort and the most amazing unconditional love I had ever experienced. I reveled in the feeling, half awake, half asleep. When I finally woke up fully, still in my darkened basement corner, I felt the humiliation, shame, and despair began crashing in on me again. You are better than this. You are more than this. It was a lovely, deep, and wide voice that brought with it the feeling and beautiful knowings of love that I experienced in my dream. You know me? I whispered, after to ask, afraid not to ask. Yes. I lie in my cot and basked in the healing warmth. I was loved. It's God for you. Or your own spirit guides telling you, which is what I believe. Later that day, our mother informed us that our cousin was getting married in Seattle. My Aunt Clara had arranged to pay for Jason, Carrie, and me to board a Greyhound bus to visit them for several weeks over the summer. I was excited and filled with hope at the prospect of getting away, but I felt I had to resolve some things within myself before I could go. Somehow I knew I had to learn from my recent experiences, or my life would continue the way it had always gone. I was unhappy with the results, and I was determined to make new choices. I thought about what I had done that had created my issues with Sean. I realized the most important thing was that I hadn't listened to the warning voice of my friends or the intuition in my heart. I promised myself I would do that from now on. The second most important thing was that I had placed myself twice in a precarious position because I chose the easy way out. Sean had been an easy way out of the long bus rides home and the long bus rides to the Planned Parenthood appointments. Had I listened to my intuition in the first place, I would not have been raped, not been with child, and certainly not been available for his subsequent physical, mental, and emotional abuse. I took a long, hard look at myself. Then I looked at what my mother had created in her life by taking the easy way out. It was easier to ignore the phone calls than to confront my father about having affairs. It was easier to stay with Robert than to face the unknown terror of leaving him and what he might do to us. Because of that, she had buried her head in the sand, refused to take look at the options, friends, and resources that could get her out of the situation. I had followed in her footsteps. My life would go the way hers had gone, or worse, unless I learned to cowboy up and take what would sometimes be more strenuous path, but what would be my path nonetheless. And while it might be full of unknowns, it would be free of abuse. I decided that minute that I would no longer be lazy about taking care of myself. The night under the stars, I took a walk in my front yard and listened to Daffodil Lament by the Cranberries. The song mirrored the feelings I was experiencing about my dad, about Sean, and about Robert. That night, I resolved to look for the lovely things in my life, just like the song said. More importantly, I learned to be the captain of my own soul. I did not fully know what that meant, but I was determined to find out. So, I mean, all in all, I mean, this is of course, logical for her to be doing here, thinking with a straight head and, following what you believe to have guided you to be here, right? But at the same time, I really don't believe a 15, almost 16-year-old is thinking in this way. I mean, yeah, she suffered tremendous trauma with getting beat up, with getting pregnant, with getting raped, with getting, all this stuff done to her. But also, the accountability portion of it, I don't think it was accepted as quickly as she'd like to believe or like to put in a book. Again, she says in the beginning of this book, this is to her best recollection. So I don't think it was so soon after. I'm and I'm just speculating here, but with everything, it just seems like even with everything going on in the beginning of the book, she did want this could have happened when she got a little bit older, a little bit into her 16, 17, and she could be thinking like that. Also, like I said before, the whole thing with her mom and saying that she was wanting comfort and she was gonna tell her and she told her, and then not giving her mom that dialogue, because as a parent, you're gonna get some kind of dialogue, be it mad, be it angry, be it sad, be it concerned. There's gonna be some kind of dialogue back. So just putting that, hey, you told her this, and then everything else was ignored and put embarrassment on you or whatever, however you felt, is kind of like you're just leaving some parts out now that should really be in the book. Like, could have left out the whole directions and put in maybe your mom's response. Again, my opinion on it. Now, I'm only going to read 3 chapters for this week because the next chapter is fairly long, and like I said, my voice is just, I have to save up my voice for a few other things. But there is I wanted to just give you guys, I believe there's 41 chapters in this book. So we're really close to seeing the end. The next chapter is chapter 30. So we have about 10, 11 more chapters left to go. So way more closer to the end of this. And if you guys haven't watched that show Melissa Moore put out with on Paramount Plus, it's called Happy Face. It's with Dennis Quaid. I do encourage you to watch it because it's a whole nother side, and I believe that she learned this side from Gypsy Rose, and that's, again, my opinion. But I do still plan on, after finishing this book, to go over some of the victims of the Happy Face Killer and a little bit more behind him, because I think we can also start dissecting a little bit more of what Melissa Moore is trying to accomplish and what exactly her dad already accomplished in his horrific crimes that he's done and everything like that. So I'm excited for that portion. I really want to get done reading this book, but I also am not forcing myself in any way because I'm just not gonna do that. I'm, again, like I said, I have some life circumstances that I'm still going through, so I'm getting back on the wagon of things. So I also wanted to update you guys over my podcast as well. So this should be uploaded on Thursday, and also once this is uploaded, I should also have a episode of my podcast, Blurred Lines, Crime, Conspiracy, and the Truth Behind the Gossip, up. It will be an updates version, and I will not do a deep dive this week, which will normally be on Fridays. I will do one next week, and we'll get into a deep dive case. And I do also really want to plan a really good episode on Gypsy Rose, maybe do a 2-parter and get kind of some of the information out there. That's kind of been a newer thing for me on my TikTok. We started talking a little bit more about it and getting the correct narrative out. And so that's always my goal with that case. And Melissa G. Moore plays a huge part in this whole thing. And I think that by doing this and bringing light to what she's trying to accomplish and her goals and aspirations to be famous does show a lot. And I think honestly she's using Gypsy Rose as a blueprint as of right now. She's seen that that fictionalized show did Gypsy some good, and I'm sure we will see maybe a little bit more documentaries on the Happy Face Killer or on Melissa G. Moore's story and things like that. Just stay tuned for that, because I foresee it happening for sure. But if you guys don't follow me on my social media platforms, be sure to follow me. Be sure to like and subscribe this video. If you guys noticed anything that I may have missed, definitely leave them in the comments below. But I appreciate y'all. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next week with the next chapters, and I'll see you guys later in my podcast. And don't forget to follow me over on TikTok, Ashtootrippy, Instagram, Ashtootrippy, and I appreciate each and every one of you guys. We'll talk about it next time. Bye.